The phone rang just after noon. Unknown number. I let it buzz twice before picking up, thinking it might be another sales call. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. He introduced himself as a clerk from the family court and asked, without hesitation, if I had an executor. I chuckled, confused, maybe a little thrown off. Executor? Of what? There was a pause. Then he said, "We've received your death certificate." It didn't register at first. Just words hanging in the air. But something in his tone, steady, procedural, made it real. He continued, explaining that my name had come up during a property filing, that a woman named Farah Khan had submitted documents as next of kin. My cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest. Signed, stamped, notarized. I didn't say anything, didn't argue. Just listened. It wasn't fear that set in. It was the quiet understanding that something irreversible had already been set in motion. And if she'd buried me on paper, I knew one thing: I would have to unearth myself. My name is Samuel Carter. I'm 41, a civil engineer from Ohio. White, middle-class upbringing, raised by two school teachers who believed in saving more than spending and saying less than necessary. I was the quiet kid who stayed late after class, the kind of man who now prefers blueprints over brunches and routine over risk. After my wife passed 5 years ago, cancer, fast and merciless, I stopped trying to fill the space she left. No kids, no social circles. Just the house we were supposed to retire in and the quiet steadiness of my work. I rebuilt that house room by room, not because I needed it perfect, but because it was something I could control. The property itself was modest, a single acre, on the edge of town. But it had been in my family for 2 generations. My father poured the foundation with his bare hands. My mother planted the trees. That land wasn't an asset. It was legacy. My sister, Rachel, always wanted more than what she was given. She had charm polished and practiced. The kind of person who could make anyone believe anything, even me. Growing up, she had a way of spinning stories just enough to turn fault into misunderstanding and greed into ambition. Still, I never thought she'd turn on me. We weren't close, but we weren't enemies. Christmas cards, polite calls on birthdays, that was our rhythm. But even with all the distance, I never once questioned her intentions. Not until someone handed me my own death certificate. Looking back, maybe I should have. There were signed small comments about the property, quiet curiosity about legal documents, passing remarks about who deserved what. I dismissed them. That was my mistake. Not trusting her blindly, but never thinking she was capable of anything worse than resentment. Turns out, resentment was just the surface. What lived underneath was colder, and far more calculated. The registrar's office was sterile. Indifferent, just like you'd expect from a place that logs births and deaths without pause. I gave them my name and waited. A clerk walked over with a manila file, flipped a few pages and stopped. Samuel Carter. Date of death, March 12th. Cause, cardiac arrest. Signed by Dr. Henley. Next of kin, Rachel Carter. He said it like he was reading a weather report. No questions, no concern. Just another file in the stack. I asked to see the document. He passed it over without hesitation. My name was right there, printed in black ink with the same address. I'd lived it for 18 years. The signature looked legitimate. The hospital name matched. My father's old Social Security number was listed as reference. Everything about it was clean, too clean. The breath caught in my chest. Not because I was scared, but because the system had no doubts. According to them, I was already gone. No bank would question it. No agency would second-guess it. I was a ghost trying to correct a clerical fiction. Outside, I sat on the concrete steps, elbows on knees, watching a kid chase a paper bag in the wind. Normal life still spinning. But mine had stopped. That evening, I drove to Rachel's place. Suburban, 2-story, white siding with a pristine lawn that had always felt too manicured for honesty. Her car wasn't in the driveway, but her husband, Darren, opened the door. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hand gripped the edge of the doorframe like it was keeping him upright. I asked where Rachel was. He said she was out. I didn't press. Instead, I said calmly, "They think I'm dead, Darren." He didn't look shocked. Just drained. Like someone who had run out of lies to tell. He didn't deny it. Didn't ask what I meant. Instead, after a long pause, he muttered, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." That sentence stuck. Not a denial, not an apology. Just a quiet admission that whatever plan they'd hatched was spiraling. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse him. I just turned and walked away. Because in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity or bureaucratic error. It was a scheme, a deliberate, calculated attempt to erase me for profit. And Rachel had done it without blinking dot in the days that followed. Fragments of memory sharpened. Small comments she made over the years that I dismissed at the time. Like the time she joked that I should let someone more organized manage the property since I was always buried in work. Or when she asked if I had a digital backup of my ID, just in case. She'd even offered once to help me get the deed reissued, something I didn't need help with. Back then, I chalked it up to her usual interference. Now, it felt like groundwork. I had always assumed Rachel's ambition was loud. But what I missed was how quietly it moved when it had a purpose. She didn't need to argue or confront. She just needed access and time. The stakes weren't just legal. Now, this wasn't about land anymore. It was about identity, reputation, the terrifying ease with which someone could write you out of existence with the right forms and a notary stamp. And if she could fake a death certificate, I started wondering what else she was capable of. What else she'd already put in motion. I didn't shout. Didn't storm into Rachel's home demanding answers. That kind of reaction might feel satisfying in a movie, but real life doesn't reward noise. It punishes it. So I drove home. Locked. The door behind me. Turned off the lights and let the house go silent. The only sound was the soft, steady rhythm of rain against the windows. That night wasn't filled with anger. It was weight slow and suffocating. There's something disorienting about realizing the world no longer considers you alive. You're still breathing, still paying taxes, but on paper, you've been filed away like expired inventory. I pulled out every document I could find. Birth certificate, social security card, bank records, medical files, even a faded rental agreement from a decade ago. Anything that tethered me to this life. It felt absurd trying to prove existence to a system I had never questioned until now. No panic. Just process. I contacted a lawyer I'd used years ago when a subcontractor tried to sue me over a drainage collapse. He was competent, discreet, and allergic to drama. I sent him everything I had with a single text. Someone filed my death. Need to reverse it. He didn't ask for backstory. Just called me 5 minutes later and said, "We'll need to build a trail." Quietly. There was no sense in confronting Rachel. She already knew I was alive. If this was her plan, she'd prepared for the fallout. What mattered now wasn't emotion. It was precision. But beneath the paperwork, something deeper was taking root. This wasn't about land anymore, or even betrayal. It was about how fragile our place in the system really is. One form, one signature, and someone like me, stable, careful, and visible in all the right ways, could be gone. That realization didn't break me. It refined me. And the next move I made wasn't out of vengeance. It was survival, strategic, measured, and already underway. There was no roadmap for undoing your own death. Just careful steps, taken one at a time, with no margin for error. I started by ordering official copies of the death certificate and the land transfer paperwork through a friend who worked in legal admin. Quiet access, no flags. The certificate was pristine, almost too pristine. But the cracks showed themselves quickly. The doctor listed as signing off Dr. Martin Henley had retired in 2021. His name hadn't appeared on any hospital roster since. A quick check with the state medical board confirmed he hadn't renewed his license, which meant someone had either stolen an old signature or forged one entirely. Then there was the witness, a cousin named Mark, whom I hadn't spoken to in over a year. His signature was cleanly placed next to the notary stamp, but Mark was living in Germany at the time of signing. I knew because I had congratulated him on his work visa in February. That alone would have been enough to raise questions. But the real fracture came when I checked my own finances. 2 of my bank accounts, 1 savings, 1 linked to my old mortgage, had been flagged for inactivity. When I called to ask why, the representative hesitated, then said my status had been updated through a government record verification. He couldn't say more, just that everything had been frozen for compliance. The utility company was worse. My gas account had been closed entirely due to occupant deceased status. Water was pending shutdown. A note in the file said, "Ownership in transition." I had never felt so unrecognizable in my own life. That's when I stopped reacting and started building. Through a colleague at a previous project, someone who had pivoted into municipal IT work, I asked for help accessing archived surveillance from the land registry office. He didn't ask why, just gave me a folder a few days later, labeled with a date and TIMESTA. MP. The footage showed Rachel, clear as day, walking into the building with a man who looked vaguely familiar. He used my ID to sign the visitor ledger. The camera angle didn't catch every detail, but it was enough. She had orchestrated the entire thing like a process. Not emotional, not erratic, just structured fraud. Every part timed, signed, notarized. I sat with the footage for an hour, playing it back. The casualness of her body language disturbed me more than anything else. She wasn't nervous, wasn't hesitating. She moved like someone doing something routine, like she'd done this before. At that point, I looped in one more person, my cousin Amir. We hadn't spoken in nearly 6 years, not since a disagreement over our parents' wills, but he was smart and had a head for details. I told him everything, and to my surprise, he didn't question a word. "Whatever she thinks she's gained," he said quietly, "it's not worth the stain." We started mapping everything out. A timeline, bank activity, utility notices, the death certificate metadata, even phone records. Amber noticed a pattern. Every major filing happened either on a Friday afternoon or Monday morning. Perfect windows for delayed responses. Fewer eyes. He tracked down the notary who signed the property transfer. She didn't remember the transaction, but her logbook showed the entry. When asked about identification, she admitted she'd only glanced at it. Said Rachel seemed organized. That word again, organized, structured, clean. The more we uncovered, the more apparent it became. This wasn't just Rachel taking a shot in the dark. This was months in the making. She had waited for the right window, knew the laws well enough to bend them without snapping them in half. But we had more than speculation now. We had evidence of forgery, misuse of government services, falsified death records, and unauthorized asset transfers. I wasn't just trying to clear my name anymore. I was assembling a record, one they couldn't ignore, couldn't dismiss, and couldn't erase as easily as they'd erased me. By the end of that week, I didn't just know what Rachel had done. I understood how she did it, when she did it, and who helped her along the way. And that clarity changed everything. Because when you know exactly how you were removed, you also know the precise path to return. Once the evidence was solid, I shifted from gathering to executing. Every piece was checked twice: document IDs, timestamps, notarized copies, metadata from emails, and surveillance footage. By the time I was done, the case looked less like a dispute and more like a blueprint for fraud. The petition itself was a writ of declaration, an official motion to challenge the false documentation and restore my legal identity. My lawyer submitted it to the district court, along with an affidavit bearing my signature, my thumbprint, and a notarized video of me holding the original property deed. There was something surreal about having to prove that you exist while standing. Right there, doing the proving. It wasn't anger that kept me focused. It was precision. Anger clouds your judgment, makes you sloppy. I couldn't afford that. Not against someone who had manipulated systems better than most people navigate them. So I told no one. No warning texts. No dramatic confrontations. Not even a heads up to Rachel. Letting her know would have given her room to pivot. She'd spent months operating in the shadows. I needed to move in the open, but quietly. The night before we filed, I went through the petition line by line. Not to double-check the facts, I'd already done that, but to remind myself of the objective. This wasn't about humiliating her. This wasn't about some final showdown between siblings. It was about the record. Because once the record says you're dead, everything else becomes optional: access to funds, medical history, property rights. And if she could fabricate that once, who's to say it wouldn't happen again? That thought haunted me more than the betrayal itself. What really stayed with me was the house. Not for its value, but what it represented. My father wasn't a wealthy man. He worked with his hands, saved every receipt, repaired his own roof. Well into his 60s. That house was the one thing he left me with intention. There were no arguments. No conditions. Just quiet trust. Letting Rachel take it through a forged document wasn't just a legal violation. It was the unraveling of that trust. The filing included a timeline of every forged submission, with cross-referenced activity from public records and digital access logs. We even attached sworn statements from the retired doctor and my cousin abroad, both confirming their signatures were either misused or fabricated. To avoid delays, I backed everything with a full digital record, labeled and encrypted so there would be no missing files excuses later. My lawyer said it was overkill. I disagreed. You don't rebuild your identity halfway. Even small steps mattered. I updated my voter registration, alerted the IRS, submitted a new affidavit to the Social Security office. Quiet actions, but each one reinforced the same message. I was alive. And I wasn't going anywhere. This wasn't a revenge campaign. There were no threats. No speeches. Just documentation and the quiet, steady weight of truth. And in a system that had so easily accepted I was gone. The truth documented, signed, filed was the only way back. The courthouse opened at 8:30 a.m. I arrived 15 minutes early and waited across the street in a cafe with a black coffee I didn't touch. Just watched the building, watched people walk in, watched the second hand on my watch tick. At 8:55, I crossed over. Inside. Courtroom 3B was already half full. Family court filings, mostly. I took a seat in the back row. No one paid me any mind. To them, I was just another middle-aged man in a navy blazer holding a worn leather folder. Which, in a way, was exactly who I was. Rachel sat up front, left side of the courtroom. Her posture was immaculate. Chin slightly raised, one hand calmly flipping through printed documents, the other holding a pen she clearly didn't need. Her lawyer sat beside her, murmuring occasionally, gesturing toward notes and exhibit copies. She hadn't seen me yet. The bailiff called the case. Number at 9:03 a.m., estate of Samuel Carter. The words echoed in a strange, disjointed way. Hearing your own name called in a case about your death does something to the brain. It doesn't compute immediately. The judge entered gray suit, glasses perched halfway down his nose, posture relaxed but eyes sharp. He shuffled through a set of pre-read notes, then looked out across the room. "Is the petitioner present?" he asked. Rachel's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we are representing the estate in." "I am," I said, standing up from the back. Rachel turned at the sound of my voice. At first, her head tilted slightly, like someone recognizing a face on a passing stranger. Then her mouth tightened. Eyes froze. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Every expression that followed said what she COULDN single quotes T. First, confusion. Then dread. Then the quick, practiced attempt at composure. I walked forward and handed my packet of documents to the clerk. Everything was in order: affidavits, original ID, supporting surveillance logs, official statements from the doctor and cousin whose signatures had been misused, a copy of my own certified statement declaring I was, in fact, still among the living. The judge took a long moment reviewing the material. He didn't rush. No questions. Just silence broken by the occasional shuffle of paper. When he finally looked up, he turned his gaze not to me, but to Rachel. "Do you recognize this man?" he asked. She stared straight ahead. Still no words. No acknowledgement. Her attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, given this new development, we'd like to withdraw the previous filing related to the estate claim." The judge didn't nod, didn't respond. He simply set the papers aside and spoke with a calm, almost tired clarity. "There will be no withdrawal at this time. This court is ordering a formal inquiry into the matter of submitted documentation, including the death certificate, the property transfer, and the notary records. We will also refer this case to the relevant investigative body for review of possible fraud, perjury, and attempted unlawful acquisition of assets." A murmur went through the courtroom, low and brief. Her husband, Darren, was seated a few rows behind. I glanced back just once. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge added, "Given the involvement of additional parties, including the witness and notary signatories, all related documentation will be held under evidentiary seal until further notice." No. One spoke after that. Not Rachel. Not her lawyer. Not me. I returned to my seat. Nothing to celebrate. No satisfaction in her silence. Just the heavy stillness of truth finally landing where it belonged. In that moment, I didn't feel triumphant. Just visible again. Real. Documented. After the session, I walked past her in the hallway. She didn't look up. Neither did Darren. A hallway full of strangers, and we were just three people passing. Through it. And yet, that morning, I had done what none of her documents thought possible. I had walked in dead and left alive, not because of drama, not because of confrontation, but because paper might lie, but facts don't stay buried forever. It's been 5 months since that morning in court. Rachel's case is still pending. Fraud, perjury, attempted unlawful possession. Her legal team requested delays twice. The last I heard, a formal hearing was scheduled, but I haven't followed the details closely. That part isn't mine to manage anymore. The house is legally mine again. The court issued a reinstatement of title within weeks of the ruling, reversing the transfer Rachel had arranged. Quietly, almost without ceremony, the system corrected itself. But it wasn't the system I trusted. It was the trail I left behind. Every Saturday, I drive out to the property. I park, unlock the gate, walk the edge of the land, and check the side of the house where the gutters used to clog infall. It's not about maintenance. It's ritual now. A way of staying anchored to something that was nearly stolen from under my name. Sometimes I think about selling it, letting go entirely, but I always end up leaving with the keys still in my pocket. Because what I was defending wasn't square footage. It was the memory of a promise. My father never said much in life, but when he left me that home, he did. So, with the quiet trust that I'd protected, that mattered more than the house itself. Since the hearing, the phone rings less. No check-ins from extended family. No birthday messages from cousins who used to send them like clockwork. The air is thinner now. Cleaner, too. That silence doesn't bother me. If anything, it taught me that not all relationships are worth repairing. Some fractures aren't loud. They just stop echoing. People often imagine betrayal as a violent rupture, a fight, a shouted secret, a slammed door. But the kind that actually breaks you comes in documents. In notarized signatures, in a filing made on a quiet Monday morning. It looks like paperwork, not a knife. And the ones who file it? They don't raise their voices. They smile. They send polite texts. They ask about your health, Rachel, and I haven't spoken since. There's nothing to say that wouldn't feel rehearsed. Nothing that would sound like truth. And maybe that's the part that lingers, not the act itself, but the realization that someone so familiar could choose to erase you because it was convenient. This entire experience didn't make me harder. It didn't make me colder. It made me precise. I keep better records now. I sign with intention. I watch for what people do in silence more than what they say aloud. And if someone's watching this, maybe trying to brush off their own discomfort, telling themselves their sibling or cousin or spouse would never, I hope you're right. I really do. But if they ever do, just remember, you don't have to burn anything down to make a point. Sometimes the best revenge is simply showing up, with your name spelled correctly and your head held steady. Alive and on record.